Jasmine Crockett went head-to-head with Chief Justice John Roberts in a congressional hearing that left the entire nation stunned. He looked her straight in the eye and said one word: unqualified. Hours later, he claimed it wasn't about her. 43 lawmakers sat frozen in silence. 10 seconds passed, and then Jasmine exposed his lie, froze the entire chamber, and left the most powerful judge in America speechless. If that insult wasn't meant for her, then why did Roberts fall silent the moment she stood? Stay with us. This is a story worth every second of your time. Room 2175 in the Rayburn House office building was charged like a battlefield under blinding white lights. The hearing on judicial ethics had drawn every eye to Chief Justice John Roberts, seated in black robes, his face carved in stone. The silence was sharp, almost unbearable, as he faced questions he had long avoided. Jasmine Crockett leaned in, her voice steady but sharp, pressing him on undisclosed financial ties and private meetings. Roberts let the pause stretch before striking back, cold and precise. I don't believe those who lack the proper standing should be lecturing the Supreme Court on ethics. His words cracked through the air like thunder. The chamber froze. Pens halted mid-stroke. Whispers died. Even the guards stiffened. All eyes swung to Jasmine, the only black woman at the table, caught in the harsh white glow. Her face remained still, her posture unbroken, but the insult pressed down like ice. The silence was suffocating, a line drawn in the air. Roberts had made his move. Now the nation waited to see if Jasmine Crockett would absorb the blow or strike back harder. The insult still hung in the air like smoke after an explosion, and the entire chamber waited for Jasmine's response. But Jasmine didn't answer. She let the silence stretch, 10 long seconds that stabbed into the room like the ticking of a merciless clock. Every heartbeat felt louder, every second heavier, until the weight of her silence became more dangerous than words. Somewhere to her left, a chair shifted, and the wooden legs groaned against the marble floor. A senator cleared his throat but swallowed hard instead, the sound embarrassingly loud in the frozen chamber. Across the press table, a reporter clutched his pen so tightly his knuckles went white, yet not a single word was written. Jasmine bent her head down, calmly flipping a page, scribbling a few notes as though nothing had been said. Her composure cut deeper than outrage. It was defiance wrapped in stillness, a refusal to give Roberts the reaction he wanted. The tension in the room curled tighter, like air before a storm. Then she lifted her head. Her eyes, steady and unblinking, were colder than anger, sharper than fury. Her voice dropped into the silence like a blade. Chief Justice, let's be clear. You were referring to me when you said not qualified, weren't you? Not anyone else in this chamber. Me. The question didn't just pierce, it demanded blood. The tension snapped tighter still, like a violin string wound to the breaking point. One more pull, one more touch, and the room would erupt. The silence snapped under pressure, forcing Roberts to finally open his mouth. He spoke slowly, each word weighed down with hesitation, his voice carrying a hint of strain. My statement was about standards in general, not directed at any individual. The words stumbled out, careful but unconvincing, like a shield too thin to stop the blow. Jasmine never blinked, never looked away. Her voice cut back, sharp and unrelenting. I asked you a direct question, and you answered with a riddle. Now you hide behind something you call a general principle? Robert's hand tapped lightly against the polished wood table. A nervous tick meant to ground himself, but instead betraying the crack in his composure. His once commanding tone softened, lost its steel, as though each syllable cost him strength. His eyes flicked around the chamber, searching for support that wasn't there, before snapping back to Jasmine's relentless stare. The chairman stayed silent, his gavel untouched, offering no lifeline to either side. Every lawmaker, every aide, every reporter leaned forward, caught in the gravitational pull of the clash. The hearing no longer belonged to procedure or protocol. It had become a duel, and the room itself was the arena. Roberts had dodged, deflected, and danced around the fire long enough. But Jasmine wasn't here to play defense. Her hand moved with calm precision as she reached into her folder and pulled out a matte black tablet. The screen lit up instantly, casting a cold glow across her face. Her fingers didn't tremble. They slid down the screen like a surgeon preparing for an incision, sharp, deliberate, without emotion. The room leaned in, breathless. Whatever she was about to reveal, they could feel it. Something was about to crack. She tapped once, then again. The tablet displayed a scrolling document, rows of names, dates, fund titles, and corporate logos, none of them random. Every entry was a collision between Roberts and power, money, influence. She stopped scrolling, lifted her head. Her voice came out low and steady, but each word landed like a punch to the ribs. June 14th, 2018. BlackRock Fund, March 2020, Merrill and Company. Both organizations had active cases before your court at the time. There was no outburst, no gasp, just a stillness so sharp it hurt to sit in. A ripple moved through the senators like a tremor under the floor. One leaned back too quickly, another adjusted his collar, a third blinked twice and looked away. No one said a word, but the silence was louder than any reaction. These weren't rumors. These were dates, names, documents, tied to the very court Roberts swore to keep impartial. Jasmine slowly raised her eyes from the screen, locking directly onto Roberts with the calm intensity of someone who wasn't here to embarrass, but to expose. The force in her stare didn't come from volume. It came from truth. Her words sliced through the cold tension like a scalpel. So tell me, Chief Justice, who exactly lacks the qualifications? The one questioning power, or the one hiding it? Roberts didn't answer. Couldn't. His spine pressed back into the chair like he was absorbing invisible weight. His right hand slid to the armrest, gripping it with fingers that turned white at the knuckles. Gone was the judge who had moments earlier wielded arrogance like a weapon. In his place sat a man grasping for silence, retreating into it. But silence couldn't shield him now. Not from this. Not from her. Jasmine didn't blink, didn't flinch. Her voice never rose, but somehow it grew heavier. She continued to read. One name, one date, one corporation at a time. August 5th, 2019, Westmark Group. November 2021, Sovereign Legal Advisory. She delivered each line like a gavel falling in slow motion. Every sentence chipped deeper into the stone wall Roberts tried to hide behind. No speculation, no accusation, just fact after fact, sharpened like bullets. Every one of them hit. There was no need for theatrics. She didn't need to yell. The data did the screaming for her. Each number dropped like a hammer. Each date made the silence around Roberts heavier. The hearing room, once a stage for his power, had shifted under his feet. And Jasmine, unmoving, composed, relentless, was now holding the ground he thought belonged to him. The numbers kept falling like blows, and with each one, Roberts shrank deeper into his silence. In a matter of minutes, the entire power dynamic flipped. The man who had once owned the room now looked like he was fighting to stay upright in it. Roberts adjusted his glasses with a shaky hand, his eyes darting from corner to corner, searching for something. Support, escape, control. But nothing came. His voice, when he tried to clear his throat, cracked slightly and faded before it could form a word. Meanwhile, several lawmakers began to shift in their seats, not uncomfortably, but decisively. Heads nodded subtly in Jasmine's direction. Their focus was no longer on the judge. It was on her. Jasmine didn't gloat. She didn't need to. She simply lowered her voice, slow and measured, each syllable heavy with purpose. If ethical standards are being used to eliminate people like me, then maybe we need to redefine what qualifies someone. Her tone didn't accuse. It revealed. Her words didn't spark applause, but they landed like verdicts. The room tilted. Not physically, but spiritually, morally. It tilted toward Jasmine. The weight of her truth had shifted the axis of power. No one clapped. No one spoke. But the silence wasn't empty. It was reverent. People were no longer watching a witness defend herself. They were watching a woman rewrite the balance of the room. Something fundamental had changed. Something invisible, but irreversible. The hearing would continue, but nothing would return to how it was 5 minutes ago. Roberts hadn't just lost control. He'd lost the room. The balance of power had already shifted, but Roberts wasn't ready to surrender. He leaned forward ever so slightly, as if the simple act of moving might restore some illusion of authority. His fingers tapped once against the desk, and his voice, when it came, was slow. Too slow, like he was stepping carefully across broken glass. I admit, my words shouldn't have been said that way, but the truth is I was referring to a staff advisor, not to you. The words hung in the air, trembling. It wasn't an apology, it was a loophole. He hadn't clarified. He hadn't retracted. He hadn't done anything, until now, when the evidence had become too sharp to ignore. It wasn't courage, it was cornered instinct, a last-ditch effort to repaint the target after the shot had already landed. But the timing was off. The damage was done. The room knew it, and Jasmine knew it even more. She didn't react immediately. She didn't frown, didn't scoff, didn't roll her eyes. She simply stared. The way a prosecutor stares when the witness just handed over the case. Then quietly, with a calm that felt colder than anger, she spoke. "Chief Justice, that's even worse. If you weren't speaking about me, then why didn't you correct it when you saw me publicly humiliated in this room?" Her words didn't just challenge his logic. They ripped straight through his defense, exposing the rot beneath the polite phrasing. The room went still again, but this time it was a different kind of silence. Not the kind that builds tension, the kind that follows impact, the kind that creeps in when everyone realizes they've just watched someone lie to cover a deeper truth. A technician in the corner didn't need to be told. He moved swiftly, fingers gliding across the control board. A soft beep broke the silence, and the chamber's massive display screen came to life. Jasmine didn't look. She didn't need to. This wasn't theater. It was evidence. The live stream rewinded 10 minutes. The image froze. Roberts mid-sentence, leaning slightly forward, lips parted in motion. The video rolled again in slow motion. The camera panned. Faces blurred in the background. But one remained sharp. His, Roberts. Eyes narrowed, not drifting, not general. They were locked, unmoving, focused directly on Jasmine Crockett as he said the words that detonated the hearing. It was undeniable, irrefutable, unmistakable. A tremor moved through the room, but no one spoke. A senator dropped his pen. Another shifted in his seat, unsure whether to react or remain still. But the screen kept playing, driving the point deeper into the walls. Jasmine hadn't exaggerated. She hadn't misheard. She had, in real time, been the sole target of the Chief Justice's words, and everyone had watched him do it. Roberts didn't speak. His hands, once neatly folded, now gripped the edge of the table so tightly that the tips of his fingers drained pale. His mouth opened slightly, then closed again. No rebuttal, no clarification, only silence. The kind that traps a man inside the echo of his own lie. And in that silence, something broke. Not loudly, but permanently. Not just trust, not just decorum, but the thin, brittle illusion that power could still rewrite the facts. What had been said was on the record. What had been meant was on the screen. And what had been denied was now carved into national memory. The room hadn't recovered from the video. It was still heavy, breathless, stunned. But Jasmine didn't stop there. She didn't ride the silence. She broke it with something deeper. She took a breath, not the kind people take before talking, but the kind you take before you bleed. Her hands rested firmly on the table, but there was a shift in her voice. Less combat, more conviction. Her eyes didn't move. They stayed fixed on the man across from her. The man who tried to define her with a single sentence. And then quietly she began. "When I was in college, I was wrongfully arrested, just for protesting a trial I believed was unjust." The words struck with no need for emphasis. They were delivered plainly, but they landed like stone. Her gaze didn't flicker, and yet the chamber felt it. Every person in the room felt it. Jasmine Crockett, who had stood unflinching under congressional lights, was now drawing power not from title or committee, but from memory. She leaned forward slightly, voice low but unshakable. "I still remember the sound of those cuffs locking around my wrists. Cold metal, dirty concrete, yellow light in that holding cell. And the charge? Lacking proper conduct. That label followed me for years. It wasn't a story. It was a scar, reopened by choice. Her tone didn't rise, it didn't need to. The images spoke louder than any volume could. Jasmine was no longer just responding to Roberts, she was unraveling the entire notion of who gets to call someone qualified in America, and why. Then she looked up, her stare locked again on Roberts. She wasn't looking at a Chief Justice anymore. She was staring down a symbol. "I didn't go to law school to make injustice look lawful," she said. "I went to law school to fight for those without a voice." The statement rang through the chamber, not as a declaration, but as a verdict. And then came the final blow, delivered not with fury, but with absolute clarity. "I've been called unqualified my whole life, and yet today, I'm sitting here, and someone else is still hiding behind a robe." The sentence cracked through the air like a bell. Final. Unforgiving. The room didn't move. No shuffle, no cough, no camera shutter. Jasmine had peeled back her history, offered her wound, and turned it into a mirror. And in that mirror, Roberts could no longer see authority. He didn't look back at her. His face had changed. Not the kind of change that comes from being challenged, but the kind that comes from being seen. His eyes no longer held their usual distance. They seemed glassy, lost, scanning nothing in particular. His grip on the table loosened. The straightness in his posture bent. He didn't look like a man in control anymore. He looked like a monument beginning to crumble from within. And Jasmine hadn't raised her voice once. The chamber still trembled beneath the weight of what had just happened. Jasmine's words, sharp, personal, unshakable, were still echoing through every corner of room 2175. But she didn't bask in it. She didn't linger in triumph. There was no victory lap, no satisfaction, just silence. Heavy, motionless, electric. The kind that settles when something irreversible has been said and everyone knows it. And in that silence, Jasmine Crockett stood as still as a blade before the final cut. The nation was watching, but she wasn't playing to cameras. Her posture didn't ask for approval. It demanded reflection. She wasn't there to perform. She was there to draw a line in the sand. And now that line stretched clear as daylight between her and the man who still sat frozen across from her. She didn't ask for an apology, not because she wouldn't get one, but because she didn't need it. She didn't lower her voice to gain pity. She didn't soften her tone for comfort. Everything about her presence, her calm, her resolve, her restraint, spoke louder than outrage ever could. And then, without a single flinch, she delivered the final blow. Qualifications aren't handed out by titles. They're proven by actions, even when no one is standing with you. It wasn't a quote. It wasn't a soundbite. It was a truth that had been earned, not in this room, but over a lifetime of fighting to be allowed in it. Her voice didn't echo, but the weight of her words pressed into the chests of every lawmaker, every aide, every journalist present. Roberts didn't move, not a muscle. The robe that once seemed to shield him now looked like it weighed 1,000 pounds. His eyes, once piercing, were glazed and vacant, like the gaze of someone still present, but no longer in control of what's happening around them. He didn't speak, he didn't blink. His silence wasn't power anymore. It was collapse. Jasmine glanced down at her notes. One last time. Not because she needed them, but because she wanted to close this with clarity. Her fingers, calm and sure, stacked the pages, clicked her tablet to sleep, and then she slowly rose. The sound of her chair sliding back was quiet, but in a room like this, where no one even dared to cough, it roared. It cut through the air like thunder. Not a single person moved. The committee chair didn't interrupt. The staffers didn't speak. The press didn't blink. They all watched, transfixed, as Jasmine Crockett stood, not just from her seat, but into something larger. Her back straightened, her chin lifted, but her eyes didn't gloat. They carried something deeper, years of being told she didn't belong, now colliding with the unmistakable reality that she had just redefined the room she was once expected to survive. Roberts remained still. His hands stayed flat on the desk, palms down, fingers spread. But there was no more strength in them, no tension, no grip. His shoulders, once squared with judicial pride, had rounded ever so slightly, as if even the robe he wore no longer wanted to hold shape. The man who had opened the hearing with cold control now looked like the air had been vacuumed from his lungs. He didn't follow her movement. He didn't try to reclaim the floor. He didn't even glance at the chairman. He simply sat, still, small, reduced not by attack, but by truth. And the worst part was, everyone had seen it happen. Jasmine took her first step from the witness table, then another. Each one was slow, measured, solid. Her heels echoed faintly against the stone tiles beneath her, but in the silence they sounded like footsteps down a long, empty hallway. She didn't look left. She didn't look right. She didn't need to. The room had already chosen where its eyes belonged. Every person in that chamber, from the youngest aide to the oldest senator, knew something had shifted. It wasn't loud, it wasn't violent, but it was irreversible. A transfer of moral weight had taken place, and the only one who didn't seem to grasp it was the man who had once held it all. She kept walking. One step, two, three. She passed the committee chairs, past the press pit, past the marble columns that had witnessed decades of hearings, none quite like this. Her posture never changed. Her pace never faltered. There was no triumph in her movement, only certainty. Behind her, Roberts remained in the same position, as if moving might cause the whole illusion to fall apart faster. His eyes were no longer pointed toward the exit, or even toward her. They drifted, lost, blank, and defeated. His hands had stopped trembling, but only because they'd surrendered to stillness. He no longer looked like a judge. He looked like a statue trying to remember what it was meant to represent. Jasmine didn't turn back. She didn't speak again. She had said everything that needed to be said. Her footsteps faded into the marble corridor beyond the chamber, but the impact of her presence didn't go with her. It stayed, lodged in every breath of silence that remained. There were no cheers, no applause, no commotion. But across the country, those watching the live stream leaned closer to their screens, on phones, on TVs, in break rooms, in living rooms. They weren't just watching a hearing anymore. They were watching a moment. A woman had stood her ground. A man had unraveled, and everyone had seen it. No one needed to spell it out. No headlines were required. The truth was already written across the faces of the powerful. Jasmine Crockett had walked out, but she had left with something no robe, no title, and no institution could take away. She left standing, and the whole country knew exactly who never got back up. For a moment, no one moved. Jasmine was gone, but the air hadn't cleared. If anything, it felt heavier, like the space itself refused to breathe again until someone acknowledged what had just happened. Robert still hadn't moved. The robe draped across his shoulders no longer seemed regal. It looked abandoned, as if the man inside it had slipped away, leaving only the cloth and a posture he could no longer hold. His fingers, still splayed on the table, seemed frozen by something colder than fear. Recognition. No one spoke. Not the chairman, not the senators, not even the clerks. A quiet respect had settled across the chamber, not for Roberts, but for the force that had just left the room. Jasmine hadn't raised her voice. She hadn't shouted, but somehow her silence had echoed louder than anything else. One senator, older, stern, unmoved for most of the hearing, leaned forward. He didn't say a word, but his eyes, which had flickered with doubt earlier, now held something closer to awe. A younger congresswoman clutched her pen, not to write, but to stop her fingers from trembling. Another aide exhaled the breath they didn't realize they'd been holding for several minutes. Across the aisle, a single page turned on a legal pad. That sound alone broke the paralysis. The chairman finally adjusted his microphone, but even then, didn't speak. He simply looked at Roberts, waiting, as everyone was, for the man to respond. But Roberts didn't. He couldn't. His gaze was pointed somewhere past the chamber walls now, somewhere beyond the cameras and the protocol, somewhere Jasmine's words had struck and lodged. He blinked once, slowly, but that was all. He wasn't processing. He was unraveling. Behind him, a staffer hesitated before stepping forward to offer him a glass of water. It remained untouched. The Chief Justice's hands were still locked in place, as if moving them would shatter whatever grip on composure he had left. The hearing was not over. But something else was, and everyone knew it. The power Roberts once wielded over the room was gone. Not stripped by scandal, not torn down by force, but surrendered silently beneath the weight of a woman who never once raised her voice. A rustle of movement began at the press table. Slowly, tentatively. Reporters glanced at each other, not for permission, but for confirmation. Did that just happen? Was it really over? Had they just watched something collapse without a sound? The answer, written across every face, was yes. One journalist finally stood, adjusting her blazer with hands that trembled just slightly. She didn't leave. She didn't even approach the mic. She just stood, watching, trying to capture in her notes something no camera could fully record. A man still seated, but no longer standing. Another senator leaned over to whisper something into the chairman's ear. It didn't matter what was said. The meaning was clear. This wasn't the hearing they thought it would be. It had become something else, something irreversible. Roberts blinked again, his mouth parted slightly as if to speak, but nothing came out. No rebuttal, no closing remark, just a soft, ragged exhale. The kind a man lets out when the armor he's worn for decades no longer fits. He slowly reached for the water glass, but not to drink. He just held it, like a lifeline. His knuckles whitened around it. Still, he didn't lift it to his lips. His jaw clenched once, then dropped again. The weight of everything that had been said, and everything that hadn't, pressed against him from all sides. And in that moment, the chamber didn't see a justice. They saw a man, one who had spent a career wielding words, now undone by silence. The chairman finally spoke. His voice was low, composed, but careful, as if trying not to step on broken glass. The committee will take a short recess. Gavel down, one tap, not loud, not ceremonial, just enough to mark the fracture. People began to stand, not abruptly, not chaotically, just slowly, as if waking up from something they didn't expect to dream. No one looked at Roberts directly, but everyone saw him, still seated, still gripping that untouched glass, still trying to rebuild something inside that could no longer hold weight. Outside the doors, beyond the marble halls, the buzz would begin soon. But inside this chamber, for one final breath, the silence remained king. Not out of respect for power, but for the moment power was stripped bare. And though the room had emptied, though the lights would eventually dim, though the words would echo into headlines, one truth would remain carved into the memory of everyone present. Jasmine Crockett walked out, and power never walked with her. It stayed behind, still seated, still silent, still shattered. And as the chamber doors finally shut behind her, what remained wasn't silence. It was a question, echoing through every hallway, every household, every corner of the country. What does it really mean to be qualified? Because what just happened wasn't just about one woman standing up to one man. It wasn't about politics. It wasn't even about the law. It was about how easily we confuse position with principle, about how often we mistake robes, titles, or authority for actual integrity. Jasmine Crockett didn't just confront a Chief Justice. She exposed something far deeper, a system that's grown too comfortable with shielding itself from accountability, especially when that accountability comes wrapped in a voice they're not used to hearing. This wasn't just a clash between two people. It was a collision between two kinds of power, one handed down, protected by tradition, draped in history, the other earned, in protest, in hardship, in silence. No one applauded. Jasmine reminded the world that the truest form of qualification isn't pedigree, it's persistence. It's standing up even when everyone expects you to stay seated, especially then. And in doing that, she delivered a lesson so simple it felt radical. The truth doesn't need to shout to be heard. It just needs to show up and refuse to leave. She never raised her voice. She never insulted him, but she stood. She stood in front of power, unshaken, and forced it to look at itself. That's not just courage. That's transformation. She didn't win that hearing with a document or a gavel. She won it with memory, with the sound of metal cuffs that never left her wrists, with the years spent carrying a label she didn't earn, with the decision to not let that label define her, but to use it, sharpen it, until it became a weapon made entirely of truth. And when she said, "I've been called unqualified my whole life, but today I'm sitting here," the room didn't just hear it, it felt it. The truth didn't ask for permission, it walked in. That's what makes this story more than just a headline. It's a warning to every room that's built on exclusion, to every title that's used as armor, to every person who believes they can hide behind tradition while ignoring accountability. Jasmine Crockett didn't just expose a man, she exposed a mindset. And she did it without shouting, without flinching, without backing down. That's the kind of power you can't erase with procedure. There's a deeper message here. For every student sitting in a class where they feel invisible, for every woman who's been told she's too emotional, for every person of color who's walked into a room and felt their voice discounted before they even spoke. Jasmine's story is their mirror, and in it, they don't see weakness. They see proof. Proof that showing up, fully, boldly, unapologetically, isn't just protest. It's survival. And sometimes it's revolution. Because the system may not always clap for you. The room may not cheer. The cameras may not be kind. But none of that matters if the truth is on your side. Jasmine didn't need the room's approval. She didn't ask to be protected. She showed up prepared to stand alone. And because of that, she didn't stand alone for long. Courage spreads, especially when it comes wrapped in silence that doesn't blink. And the quote she left behind, "Qualifications aren't handed out by titles. They're proven by actions, even when no one is standing with you," will outlast any gavel, robe, or committee transcript. Because that line wasn't meant for Roberts. It was meant for everyone listening who's ever doubted their own voice. For everyone who's ever been told to wait their turn. For everyone who's ever had to work twice as hard to be seen as half as legitimate. That line is a blueprint, a warning, a challenge, a reminder that sometimes the most qualified person in the room is the one who had to fight to get in, not the one who was born sitting there. And in that sense, Jasmine didn't just flip the script, she rewrote the entire page. So what's the real takeaway? It's this. If you hold a title, make sure your actions are worthy of it. If you sit in power, understand that silence is not protection, it's exposure. And if you've ever been told you're not enough, remember, they don't get to define your worth. You do. Every time you show up, speak clearly, and refuse to bow. Jasmine didn't win because she was louder. She won because she was clearer. And the country saw it, felt it, learned from it. The world doesn't change in grand moments. It changes when someone decides not to sit down, when someone takes the insult meant to silence them and turns it into a sentence that echoes across a nation. That's what Jasmine did. And now the burden of proof has shifted, not just in that room, but everywhere. If you call yourself qualified, prove it. If you lead, lead with integrity. If you speak, mean it. If you're watching, don't just cheer, stand. Because somewhere out there, someone just heard her. And they're next. Thank you for watching until this moment and for standing with us on this journey for justice. Your support means everything. Like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss what's next. And we'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment below and let us know what moved you most in this story. Together, our voices make a difference,